we'll figure out a way to connect. So it's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, David McConville, media artist and theorist, president of the Buckminster Fuller Institute, media artist and theorist whose work explores the potential of immersive visualization tools to expand perspectives on the nature of cognition. David is co-founder of the Elumenati, a design and engineering firm, designing custom installations for clients from art festivals to space agencies. He's also president of the Buckminster Fuller Institute and creative director of the Worldviews Network. The title of David's talk is Visualizing Cosmic Models, a Situated Approach. We'll go for 30 minutes, and then we'll have 5 minutes for Q&A at the end. So please hold your questions till the end of the presentation.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, David.
All right, welcome everybody. Thanks for coming out. This is sort of in tandem with presentations I'm giving at the end of the hall at night. I did it last night in this big inflatable dome. Was anybody there? Okay, cool. So there's some context. Good. Doing it again tonight, 7:30 to 10. Invite anybody to come out if any of this piques your interest. So I want to start off with a Buckminster Fuller quote, almost obligatory given my position, that he says, "Can we think of and state adequately and incisively what we mean by universe? For universe is, inferentially, the biggest system. If we could start with universe, we would automatically avoid leaving out any strategically critical variables." This really goes straight to the point of everything I'm going to be talking about today. And another quote from a cosmologist named Edward Harrison, who says that the universe, capital U, is by definition is everything and includes us experiencing and thinking about it. The universe is, lowercase u, are the models of the universe that we construct to explain our observations and experiences. Now, this is a really critical distinction that I'm going to keep returning to. So we look at what do we mean by universe? If we look at this term, it's generally defined as the totality of everything that exists. Hints can be found in the etymology of the word that we use today, because this modern word universe derives from the ancient Latin universum, which means everything rotated as one, or everything rotated by one, right? And the Roman philosophers had adopted this from the ancient Greek term that meant circumambulation, which is to walk around something. And the word cosmos that we use was derived from the ancient Greek term cosmos, which meant order or ornament, right? So it's a bit different than the way that we actually use it most of the time. And that our notion of the totality of existence comes from this idea of an orderly, ornamental procession going around something. And it's not really difficult to imagine how this notion originally emerged, because for thousands of generations, we've had to create ways of tracking and predicting these orderly motions of the heavens that we perceive from the surface of the earth. And cultures around the world have developed techniques for comprehending these connections between the heavens and the earth. This wasn't really just out of curiosity or boredom. It was really actually essential for our species' survival. Comprehending and communicating all of these cycles and patterns were central to our understanding of procreation, hunting, gathering, agriculture, navigation. I mean, this was really, really important at one time. And some of the earliest artifacts demonstrating human creativity show the importance of these cycles in the evolution of our notions of time. So for instance, the lunar cycles obviously were intimately connected to the gestation cycles and female cycles. So numerous prehistoric artifacts have shown ways in which we've attempted to keep track of these lunar cycles. This is about 2 or 3 inches wide, carved on bone, and it's about 40,000 years old. So we've been doing this for quite some time. This is a carving in a rock from Australia, an Aboriginal engraving of an emu. I'm not sure of the date. It's quite old, but it's difficult to date these things. But it actually mirrors what they call the emu in the sky, which is a dark cloud constellation. So it's a way of projecting and envisioning characters in the sky based on their particular perspective in Australia of looking at this great rift in the Milky Way and seeing this figure, which also, when it's in the sky at that particular point, it happens to correlate with the time that emus lay their eggs. It's also been suggested that ancient cave paintings may in fact represent early constellations. This is the Cave of Lascaux, and Dr. Michael Rappengluck did an analysis of this. He believes that that actually represents the summer triangle between the birdman, this bison, and this little bird. And cultures throughout the world have been doing this, ever since. We've been projecting these constellations onto the sky with our mind's eye. We've been envisioning these great dramas unfolding across the heavens, which have really served as mnemonic devices that have helped us to explain the movements of these celestial bodies and to communicate them across generations. And the constellations intersecting with the sun's apparent path across the sky have been assigned particular importance, right? We call these constellations the zodiac, which is a tradition that dates back to antiquity. From our perspective, this zodiac we see rotating around the Earth, and the sun's position relative to these different constellations in the zodiac continue to influence how we conceive of the different ages of the world. If you follow all the brouhaha around 2012 and precession and all of these things, I mean, this still has a huge impact on the collective psyche. And in fact, our word for time derives from the Greek Kronos, who was the primeval god that was the personification of time. The Romans called him Aeon, and he was often depicted as turning the wheel of the zodiac, right? So he was actually the one kind of bringing about the manifest cosmos. And the Hermetic saying, as above, so below, really eloquently summarizes the belief that many cultures have had and have as they've sought to understand these connections between the microcosm and the macrocosm. And we are actually subject to these grand cycles. I mean, regardless of your belief in astrology, I mean, our lives are dictated by the relationship of all of these celestial bodies that control, the light cycles and the heat cycles and gravity and all kinds of things. But our internal clocks are also, have a say in the cyclic behaviors of our bodies. We call these circadian rhythms. They really affect our organs, our digestion, our sleeping patterns, our body heat, but we're also entrained by these cosmological cycles. So we've kind of got these cycles that sync up. And in celebration of these grand cycles, we find this theme of orderly procession recurring in rituals and imagery around the world. Today we still find circumambulation around temples and altars. In Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, Christianity, these things are still very much embedded within our culture. And even the perceived curvature of the sky has shaped our collective imagination, as these literal and figurative visions of the heavens have come to symbolically represent this universal order across cultures. Domes have often enclosed humanity's most sacred environments, as interpretations of the heavens have really established a kind of frame of reference through which the meaning and purpose of existence has been interpreted. So Christian visions of an orderly cosmos were adopted from the ancient Greeks. The Catholic Church simply substituted Kronos with the hand of God. A couple thousand years ago, Aristotle proposed that humans lived at the center of a series of nested celestial spheres that were holding up the stars and the planets. And this was a very aesthetically pleasing model. Everything was spherical, everything was clean, and it really dominated the Western worldview for well over 1,500 years. But 500 years ago, Nicholas Copernicus came along, and through his observations and calculations, he proposed that the sun, not the earth, was at the center of these celestial spheres, and that this was kind of this abrupt change in what he was proposing. It was very counterintuitive for the generations of people that had perceived the stars actually rotating around them. So there was quite a strong reaction to when he proposed this. And Thomas Kuhn sort of famously coined this term paradigm shift to describe what happened at that time. We use this all the time now, this notion, but it was originally coined to describe what happened is that from that shift from the geocentric to the heliocentric cosmos. And it's still actually really important today. I mean, like when we're here talking about science and reductionism and all of these things, this still has a huge impact on the way that we conceive reality, because a lot of our modern education and economic and political systems are still largely based on the assumptions that emerged over this 500-year period that we call the scientific revolution. One of the most prominent ideas was that rational humans could objectively study the world, right? By the time of the Renaissance, the development of linear perspective had appeared to demonstrate the possibility of simulating a kind of God's eye view on the world that was removing us from it. And over the course of the Enlightenment, the scientific method was developed in hopes of verifying the existence of this objective reality using repeated empirical observations. New tools like the telescope and microscope had dramatically extended the range of human perception, resulting in an explosion of these specialized knowledges and techniques. Space and time were further quantified into these mathematical abstractions. They were imagined as absolutes existing independently of human experience and understandable solely through human intellect. And the predictive power of these equations really reinforced this notion of a mechanical clockwork universe. Mechanical clocks were first invented supposedly in the 13th century, even though we're finding amazing old machines that the Greeks had as well. But this notion of the clockwork universe that was believed could be completely comprehended by the rational mind. And the more observation and theory aligned, the more faith in human reason increased, convincing many that the mysteries of the universe were well within their grasp. But these achievements also served to strengthen a perceived division between mind and matter, subject and object, and perhaps most importantly, humanity and nature. Increasingly, it seemed that the best way to understand nature and the cosmos in general was by reducing it to its component parts. The heavenly spheres of the Middle Ages and the lived cosmos of many, many ancient cultures were gradually transformed into this materialistic universe governed by mechanical laws. And over time, the so-called Copernican principle took hold, convincing many that there was nothing special about our mediocre home in the cosmos. When the celestial spheres were shattered, we thought that everything else in the universe was elemental, so therefore, there's nothing special about this place. And all of this probably sounds quite familiar, because in many ways, this reductionist view, this mechanistic view of reality, still dominates our educational system, with students forced to memorize, facts and discouraged from considering meaning and purpose. When I was young in school, I was always asleep, number one, but when I was awake, I couldn't relate to this system that simplified the complexities of life into this black and white multiple choice version of reality for no apparent reason, right? As I grew up, I realized, of course, there was a reason. We were being prepared for this consumer economy in which our worth is based on our purchasing power, right? The logic of the Copernican principle had reduced our home planet to little more than an exploitable resource, and we were being trained to disregard the social and environmental costs of our actions as externalities, all in service of perpetually expanding the aptly named gross domestic product. So today we're increasingly distraught by these consequences, as we're seeing all over the world, and people are finally focusing on the economy as the actual leverage point, this economic paradigm. And these disconnections are really manifesting in both subtle and profound ways, not the least of which has been the division of humanity and nature embedded within the economic systems, right? This linear notion of time is rarely associated with the cycles of life, instead becoming a limited commodity upon which to capitalize. So while the Copernican shift undoubtedly resulted in a dramatic expansion of very useful specialized knowledge, it also thoroughly divorced the world of value from the world of facts within this modern scientific paradigm. But in the past century, a standard scientific model of the universe has undergone a series of upgrades. Today, instead of a simple line drawing, we have an interactive data visualization representing around $10 billion of research. This is what I've been showing in the dome. It's called the Digital Universe Atlas. It was funded by NASA and curated by the American Museum of Natural History using scientific observations from around the world. And here's just kind of a quick fly-through. You can actually watch all of this on YouTube if you look up the known universe. But we've got satellite trajectories of all the ways in which we can observe phenomena happening around the planet, far beyond the visible range of what we can see. As we zoom out, we can see the trajectory of the moon and of the planets, simulating impossible speeds as we fly out of the solar system. We see the constellations start to expand into their dimensionality as we get further and further away. The radiosphere, our radio footprint in space, our own galaxy of hundreds of billions of stars, all of the other hundreds of billions of galaxies, until the point where we finally reach the outer edge of what we call our cosmic horizon, our particle horizon, the cosmic microwave background, which is very, very, very ancient light emanating from the beginning of the cosmos, according to this particular model. So in many ways, this atlas represents the culmination of the scientific quest to finally create a God's eye view on the universe, right? This has been the holy grail for centuries of science. But there's a pretty good chance that most of you haven't even heard of this, much less thought about its implications for our current paradigms that we're operating under. And it's not that they haven't been trying to get the word out. It was posted on YouTube in 2009. Last time I checked, it had over 8 million views. But when I went to the suggested links on the side of YouTube, I wanted to see what could possibly be more popular than the known universe. I was really curious. Well, not surprisingly, I might need some audio here for effect.
good? Yes, you can.
So we've got David after dentist, you know, a wedding dance, water balloon in the face, and surprise kitty, which is what, like 42 million views, right? So like this kind of shows you where our culture is at the moment. And because of all these distractions, you probably haven't heard the biggest news of all, right? Wait for it, wait for it. Earth is once again at the center of our cosmic model, right? It's like the punchline to the ultimate cosmic joke. But to understand this, it's not just so simple as going ha ha Copernicus. That we have to comprehend this strange state of affairs by transcending these dualistic views of reality. It's the only way to really understand what this model's doing, because the complexity of this requires examining it from multiple perspectives. So from the subjective perspective, we are at what astronomers call the observational center, right? As we look out, what we see is dependent on where, when, and how we are. Because light has a speed limit, the further we peer out into space, the further back into time we see. When we measure the stars and galaxies, we're viewing them from humanity's unique perspective in the cosmos. This is the essence of the special theory of relativity, actually. Space and time aren't absolute, they're relative to the observer. Additionally, our view is occluded by the gas and dust in our own galaxy, creating huge blind spots in our model. In other words, all perspectives on the universe are thoroughly situated. Obtaining a purely objective God's eye view is actually impossible. This is what we can consider our relativistic sense of time and space. You see these big blank areas, those are just places that we can't measure right now with our current instruments. But relativity doesn't at all mean that our empirical measurements are useless. I know we like to down on objectivity, but it's a really useful notion. By imagining ourselves as objective observers, we've been able to measure and map the world with ever greater precision, developing what we think of as our ordinary scientific sense of time in the physical world. We've continued to extend our sensory range, pushing our abilities to comprehend and simulate phenomena far beyond just our individual experiences. This has provided really extraordinarily useful insights, enabling us to perceive the world in entirely new ways. For instance, we can now visualize numerous processes that intuitively reveal the dynamics of our planetary system that were previously invisible to us. In this case, air currents and ocean currents around the planet. And perhaps not surprisingly, a number of the models that we were taught in school fail to truly demonstrate the dynamic nature of the cosmos. This is actually the public premiere of a project called Infinitas, a four-dimensional interactive visualization platform, kind of a virtual time machine that extends our ability to see and perceive ourselves in time. It's created by my colleague Kevin Kelly, who couldn't be here, but he wrote a beautiful book called The Home Planet many years ago. And he's looking and taking into account the fact that the sun is traveling around the Milky Way. We're taught this kind of simple elliptical model where the sun is static, right? Well, when you start moving that, we're going around the sun at 60,000 miles per hour relative to the sun. The sun's moving around the galaxy at about 500,000 miles an hour relative to the galactic core. And so we are actually spiraling around in these beautiful helical patterns. So when you woke up this morning and you came down here and you're going to go to bed tonight, you're actually millions and millions of miles somewhere else, right? Everything is constant motion, dynamics at every single scale. And Kevin's working on ways of turning all of this into new ways of seeing time, new ways of relating to the ways in which we're kind of objectively, attempting to measure our place in the cosmos. As we simulate these vast scales of space and time, the entire universe appears as a constant flow of energy and movement. From the subatomic to the galactic scale, everything is in perpetual motion and change. This is simulations of tens of millions of years of galaxies colliding into one another. And perhaps most astonishingly, all of this is integral to each one of us. I mean, this is what modern science has revealed, right? Our bodies are composed of elements that were formed over the course of billions of years on the inside of the hearts of stars. As we experience existence, there is no real separation between our bodies and our minds, or humanity and nature. In the very real sense, each one of us is a part of the process of the universe becoming aware of itself. And this is only possible because from a systemic perspective, everything is interconnected and interdependent. We now know that Earth is not only the observational center, but it's also the ecological center of our universe. It's the most complex and self-organizing system that we've ever been able to detect. And science continues to demonstrate how extraordinarily fortunate we actually are to be here. We're finding that life on this planet is supported by these countless synergistic interactions and conditions. that we can't understand it just by reducing it. The whole really is more than the sum of the parts. So for instance, the Earth's magnetic field deflects solar winds that are constantly bombarding our planet from the sun. This would look like a torus, like magnets around, iron filings around a magnet, but it's being pushed back and protecting our atmosphere from being blown away into space. And we're also in the Goldilocks zone of our solar system, where the temperature is just right for liquid water, not too hot, not too cold. And in conjunction with the atmosphere, this makes the planet's surface ideal for supporting life as we know it. We thought we would be finding life all over the place by now. We haven't found any. And because from a cultural perspective, we are all actually imagining this together. We are creating this universe as we go along. We're kind of in this process of what you might call cosmopoiesis. We're universe-creating beings. Because for countless generations, we've turned to the dome of the sky to find meaning in our existence and to synchronize with these cycles of life. By exploring the many cultural attempts to make sense of the cosmos, we can come to appreciate the value of multiple ways of knowing and how different perspectives are constantly shaping our world. Studying these historical perspectives can also encourage us to reflect on how models of the cosmos have shaped perceptions of reality. They kind of act like operating systems for our paradigms, right? And I'm glad that the Occupy folks are starting to really talk about it as an operating system. They set the frames of reference for how we interpret our experiences of reality. Because even though the standard model is really a linear progression that began with a big bang and is slowly dissipating via entropy, there are all of these other conditions that are operating that science has not been able to really account for because of its failure to really look at synergistic processes. Recently, physicist Roger Penrose claims to have detected imprints within the cosmic microwave backgrounds that he says are remnants of the last cosmic cycle before the Big Bang. And in this way, we've kind of literally come full circle. He's seeing it as this regenerative process. And he calls these kind of universe cycles, interestingly enough, aeons, after Chronos. But believe me, even this $10 billion model of the cosmos is built on assumptions that will change over time. In many ways, the more we try to quantify the universe, the more mysterious it becomes. In recent years, astronomers appear to have detected a growing number of unseen dark forces that are simultaneously pulling things together and pushing them apart. Dark energy, dark matter, dark flow, they have all kinds of names of it, but they're basically coming up with things to justify their equation. So either our understanding of gravity is completely wrong, or there's some entirely other realm of reality that we have to make up and be very comfortable with the fact that we can't actually see over between 95 and 99% of what's out there. So much for a rational clockwork universe. So, like Magritte points out in his famous painting, The Treachery of Images, we have to be very, very careful with our representations. He reminds us that this is not a pipe. It's, of course, a painting of a pipe. And in the same way, we need to realize that even this is not the universe. It's a little u universe, our current limited perspective of the big U universe, the view of which is going to continue to expand and evolve as we grapple with its mysteries. Which suggests to me that perhaps it's time to accept the universe as inherently paradoxical. Instead of attempting to interpret our experiences through this outdated black and white view of reality, we should appreciate the complex, technicolor, multidimensional, and truly mysterious nuances of the big picture. We know that the universe is much more than a linear machine dictated by physical laws, and the experiences of awe, humility, and wonder, and of course non-dual, can often teach us more about existence and the nature of the cosmos than abstract mathematical equations and periodic tables. By viewing the world and time from multiple perspectives, we can be better prepared to navigate the complex challenges currently facing humanity, which leads us to a very simple mandate. we need to reoccupy the universe. The universe matters because we are the universe mattering. It's not something out there, only accessible via telescopes and particle colliders. Earth is once again at the center of our universe because it's the only place that supported our existence. Yet for far too long, we've taken our home planet and life itself for granted. We've been hypnotized by this myth of a perpetual growth economy. But we're learning to appreciate that true wealth derives from healthy communities and ecosystems. We need to reimagine a big picture in which Earth's ability to sustain life is the ultimate source of all value. Because whatever perspective you choose to take on time, I encourage you to pay closer attention to the regenerative ecological cycles that support the successful structures, patterns, and habits of the cosmos. And if you want to see what it looks like when people do this, I just want to close by giving you an invitation to visit the Idea Index, which is a series of projects submitted to the Buckminster Fuller Challenge over the course of the past 5 years. And we put out a call to the world to submit projects that are designed to make the world work for 100% of humanity in the shortest possible time through spontaneous cooperation without ecological offense or to the disadvantage of anyone. Right? If we really want to accept non-duality in all of its gloriousness, we have to recognize it's everybody or it's nobody. That we are such an integral part of this planet that our greatest evolutionary task is to learn from these successful regenerative cycles and apply them in the way that we are designing human society so that we can cultivate the conditions for life on this planet. Because, you know, what better way to kind of celebrate this truly non-dual interconnected nature of the universe by applying ourselves to become participants in the creation of a truly resilient and compassionate world. Thanks.
Awesome.
Thanks.
That was beautiful. So we have extra time for questions. If you put up your hand with a question, I'll come to you and hand you the mic.
Just probably impossible to do, but is there a way to represent the Kobe image as, or to indicate that that's only 5% or less of what's actually out there?
In the presentation we have models of dark matter, which is a way to show, it's actually only the region between Andromeda and the Milky Way, but we show like the amount of mass that's being detected by the gravitational measurements that isn't there. So that's one way that we can do it, is to show the stuff that is supposedly missing, you know. But in general, we could, you know, given enough time and resources, try to indicate that. But I think a more poetic approach might be even more useful, because I think that the approach of modern cosmology to constantly insist that a theory of everything is right around the corner, I prefer to take the models that are being handed out by the kind of official status quo scientific establishment and interpret them for what they're actually showing us, instead of trying to embellish them too much. I think it's a lot more interesting to see how the attempts to model are really demonstrating the limitations. And that's a lot of the work that I do. Is my goal is to get science centers to change the way they talk about the universe. Because right now, I've never seen a presentation in a major science center that talks about the phenomena of the Earth being at the center of the cosmos with any significant attention. Right? They kind of just miss it, like, oh yeah, it's the observation, it's just consciousness. You know, I mean, like, it's very funny, because it's almost like this model is challenging the assumptions of the modern scientific establishment as much as Copernicus challenged the assumptions of the Catholic Church 500 years ago. And we need to really look at, you know, if it's only 5%, and that's theoretical, we can really only see 1%, you know, let's let people in on that. People aren't stupid, and I think that a lot of times, you know, when I go into these science exhibits, there's a real attempt to kind of suspend disbelief. I'm interested in how we can suspend belief. You know, like, let's get people to really question what it is that they take so dear that we really can objectively represent everything on this.
So David, your model is that we need more than one model. That you're emphasizing the importance of a plurality of models. Is that one way to say it? Or
yeah, absolutely.
Plurality of stories.
I mean, a lot of what I show in these presentations are what different cosmic models reveal about the cultures from which they arose. You know, and I think that our tendency, I mean, like, honestly, this whole Mayan calendar thing is a great example. You know, because of our linear notions of what time are, and like we sort of overlay our interpretations on all of these other cultures. And that by examining these and inviting people in, I work very closely with a Dakota storyteller for interpreting a lot of this stuff and some of the work that I do, and with Buddhists and different people from different backgrounds. And I think that we need to invite people in to critique, instead of the kind of Western academia going in and, you know, squatting to interpret everybody else's stuff. Invite everybody else to come in and interpret the limitations of what science is, so that we can have a real dialogue or metalogue, if you will.
Occupy science.
Yeah, occupy science.
think your presentation is amazing, the way you're using visualization, and I'm wondering if there's a way you can apply the same methodology just to life on planet Earth, where it seems the problem is that everybody is centering their view of the world based on themselves and not on the whole, all of us together. The same analogy. It's not just our perspective in the universe, but our perspective from ourselves. That's what people are doing. Maybe that's the root of our problem as well. And maybe you could use the same techniques, the same visualization techniques, just to talk about planet Earth and how we shouldn't be thinking of it from our personal perspective, but from this more global perspective. So I'm encouraging you to do something like that, because you're a very effective communicator that I think can reach people. So,
Thanks.
yeah.
We're actually doing that in a 3-year project that's been funded by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. So I'm working with California Academy of Sciences and a number of other science museums and NOVA, the television series, to do exactly that, to use visualizations of dynamic processes and metabolic flows, so that, especially in planetariums, actually we're doing the one here at Cal Academy in early December, and we're making a whole narrative around the oaks and the kind of ecosystem services that the oaks provide. And the goal of that is to start off with the universe, and then zoom people in so they get a global sense of all these interactions, and then zoom them in even further so that they really become situated within their own bioregions and their own watersheds, so that we look beyond these political boundaries that are, it's an evolutionary dead end to keep trying to chop up the world based on these abstractions, that we really need to understand exactly what you're saying, these ecological cycles. And to do that with these visualizations is incredibly effective, because they're just things that we don't see due to our limited perceptions. And it's a real gift to be able to have these tools right now at a time when we really need them. If you go to the site worldviews.net, you can read up on what we're up to. It's got the schedule of events we're doing and everything else.
Any more questions?
David, I know you've been doing this for a while. Could you just share, how do people respond to this kind of immersive experience? I know there's a spectrum.
People were there last night, asked them. Yeah, it's a spectrum. I think that what I think it does is tap pretty deeply into this true interconnected sense that we have when we look up at the sky, right? That for millennia, our cultures have been, clocking all of this stuff. And we're so used to seeing these little screens and these little iPads and these little, and it's this window onto another world. And by doing this within that particular environment, and especially doing it live so that people can exchange energies, and it's, in a way, for me, it's like a culturally acceptable form of ritual within a scientific context, so that people can come together. And what we're doing with the Worldviews Network is really using that to facilitate dialogues. We're after it. The big question for me isn't how people are reacting when they walk out. It's what are they going to do the next day? How are they going to further engage with their own community? How are they going to seek out designs and strategies so that human beings can more effectively learn from the cycles that support us? And we're just getting started on that. We're doing evaluations and all kinds of formal stuff to see how well that works within the Worldviews Network. But, people generally like it. There's a lot of kind of epiphanic, big eyeballs coming out.
I'm not a video gamer, but I hear it's pretty popular, and I'm wondering if this would lend itself to some kind of an interactive video game that would get a lot of young people really understanding this paradigm shift.
Actually, these tools derive basically because we can do all of this interactively now. Like the presentations I give, I use a like a gamepad controller, and the only reason I can do this is because 10 years ago there was a room full of supercomputers at the American Museum of Natural History running this whole universe model. By 2004, we'd taken it down to a single machine for a Burning Man installation. And it worked so well that we're now taking it all over the place with these laptops and these inflatable domes. And now in the past year, my company has developed a game based version of this, where we're using gaming engines and writing custom code to import scientific data so that we can use the power of what these gaming engines have available because they're being pushed by market forces. And it's a lot greater than what scientists generally have access to in terms of visualization. So if you go on YouTube, we have a demo video up there called World Viewer that you can watch, and it allows us to basically overlay video animations of all kinds of flows around the planet, put on geolocate panoramas so people can go down and see sacred sites all over the world, look at video. And so we're working very much within that area right now to try to understand how can we leverage the power of those tools to help people to understand a lot of these relatively seemingly complex concepts that really aren't. You know, I mean, like people come in for 30 minutes and it's amazing. They walk out with this notion of what our cosmic horizon is. It's very hard to talk about, but you're right. Like our visual cognitive capacity is so strong that, especially through play, it's a pretty phenomenal way to help people understand these things. No, my company's the Illuminati, which is in the brochure, not the Bavarian conspiracy, it's the other one. But worldviews.net is the project that I'm doing with science centers around the U.S. Cool.
Wonderful.
All right, thanks everybody.
So we'll take a 5-minute break. Be back in 5 minutes. I showed